Today we'll conclude chapter number 10 and also we'll conclude the semester. There are a few topics that we need to talk about. One of those is whether teams are always needed or not, and maybe up to some extent those issues we have discussed while we were discussing different topics related to this chapter. Now, one of the issues which usually or we can say somehow a criteria we can use in order to judge whether we need teams or not, one of those is up to what extent we need different perspectives. Not only, of course, different perspectives. In addition to different perspectives, we can say different skills, different attitudes, maybe even sometimes different competences and so on. So here to set up a criteria, we can say that the more we need diversity in the human resources needed for a certain task, the more maybe we need a team. The less we need diversity, or diversity in terms of competences, abilities, way of thinking, and so on. Okay, so maybe this is one of the issues. The main idea here that we do not always need teams. Sometimes we can do the work with a small group of people, or even mainly we mean here individuals. Okay, so this depends about some issues here. One of those is up to what extent we need different competences or different perspectives. Now, another issue here is up to what extent the output needed is greater than individual effort. Sometimes there are simple tasks where the output can be achieved depending on an individual. Of course, in such cases, we do not need teams. But sometimes one individual cannot achieve the desired results. So in such cases, we need more than one individual and so on. So the complexity of the assignment or the situation itself is one of the issues, and we can say here the size of the effort is also one of the issues. A third point here is up to what extent we need people to do different assignments or tasks, to conduct different tasks in an independent way. So the more, and this means that we need a variety of skills and competences and experiences, by the way. Okay, so sometimes there are, I can say here, some specialized areas where one individual cannot cover all those areas, and this means that we need more than one individual to cover those different areas. So in such cases also we need teams. Again, teams are efficient, effective, etc. in most cases, but this does not mean in any how that always we need teams. Okay, of course, always we think about the situation. If the situation desire an individual to achieve the situation, the results, then individuals we are going to use. If not, and we need a team, then here we must go for teams. This again depends on the situation itself. Now, those points are some of the points that we can use in order to judge the situation, whether we can depend on teams or we can use individuals. Now, of course, as usual, in each chapter we always discuss the global implications and how the topics that we have discussed are different from one culture to another. Now, usually, and this is maybe bizarre somewhere, strange, that teamwork in countries other than USA is more available. Okay, though we can say when we talk about professional success and so on, the private sector in the United States of America are more successful in such practices, but also the availability of the practice itself in other countries, it is more. Okay, of course, when we talk about حد يسكر الباب لو سمحت. Okay, now of course here maybe the culture itself, and up to what extent we are talking about individualistic culture and collectivist culture and so on, this is playing a certain role here. Okay, but again, here we are not talking about up to what extent the practice itself is professional. We are talking about up to what extent the practice is available. And here we need to differentiate between those two points. Now, one of the issues also that self-managed teams are less successful when we talk about countries or cultures where is there low tolerance for ambiguity. And this we have discussed earlier in previous chapters. We said that there are cultures with high tolerance for ambiguity, like Western countries and so on. And there are other cultures with low tolerance for ambiguity. And usually cultures with low tolerance for ambiguity, they do not plan for long term. Usually they deal with issues on the short run mostly rather than on the long run. Also, wherever there is high power distance between different levels and so on, and how this is perceived by different individuals, the more there is a high power difference, the less also the successful are teams. Okay, why when we talk about high power distance we are talking about less potential for success? Why when we talk about high power distance? And power distance, to remind you, it is how the authority is perceived by different levels. And we talk here about the relation between lower and higher level, how it is interpreted by, especially when we talk about employees working in organizations and so on. Why? Usually when we talk about high power distance, there is less coordination and communication between those levels. And when we talk about teams, we need more communication and coordination between members of any teams. And also when you talk about tolerance for ambiguity, teams usually, they must depend on themselves. They identify the goals, they design the plan, they start to implement depending on the team capacity. Now, whenever there is low tolerance for ambiguity, here we are talking about less ability to plan for longer terms, and this is usually going to affect teams in a certain way. Another issue which is related to, we can discuss under the global implications dimension, is team cultural diversity. Okay, we said that diversity is up to some extent it is going to be harmful for the team, but if it is controlled in a certain way, it is going to be of a positive effect here. Now, usually when we talk about national differences, diversity caused by national differences like ethnicity and sometimes even religion or cultural backgrounds and so on, usually it reduces the efficiency of the team. Okay, but also research indicates that usually teams who work together for more time, they have more potential to overcome such problems. Usually they have a chance more to understand each other. They usually resolve some of the problems caused by misunderstanding of some issues and so on. Okay, but again, this is usually affecting the efficiency of the team in a negative way. But again, teams usually after a few months, as it is mentioned, as a result of some researches, 2 to 3 months, they can overcome such problems in a certain way. And when such problems are overcome, then here we are talking about a positive management to the diversity issue, and this usually should affect the team in a positive way, not in a negative way, of course. But again, diversity, not necessarily that it should cause a negative or consequences. This depends how management manage diversity and how the organization itself deal with diversity issues. With, of course, when you talk about how employees managed in an environment where there is high diversity. Of course, last thing to talk about is effective teams. Maybe in this chapter we have discussed a lot of points. I'm not going to go through those points again. What is available here is maybe a summary of what we have studied in this chapter. When you talk about when we talk about those 4 dimensions which should help us to create an effective teams, we said that the context itself is important. The composition of team is also important, in addition to other issue. Okay, now under each dimension there are sub points. Now what is available here is the most important of those points. Of course, in addition, we need to memorize here other points. The availability of such points usually, or such situations or circumstances, should help the team to be more effective. So when we talk about what are the characteristics of effective teams, here we are talking about the same topic when we have discussed how to create an effective team. Okay, we said in order to create an effective team, there are some factors that we need to take care of inside the organization in order to assure that we have an effective teams. Anyway, one of the most important issues, and also it was discussed, the more the individuals who are selected to be members of a certain team, the more they are willing to work with others, or they have such traits and characteristics, the more there is a potential for success here. Okay, so usually when we select individuals to work in teams or within teams, we must take care here of some of the personal traits or some of the attitudes and values which should facilitate dealing with others. Now, if individuals do not have such characteristics, we can say, or features or personal traits, whatever, usually there is going to be a lot of problems. Of course, one of the issues is up to what extent not only there is a willingness to deal with others, also sometimes up to what extent there is willingness to have new skills or competences, which we are talking here about changing some of the competences in a positive way in order to enhance the individual's ability to work within teams. Of course, all those are important issues to create an effective team which should help in performing different tasks and assignments. Okay, any questions? طيب، يعطيكم العافية.